promised you the world in a bright, safe light. Sold you beauty in a bottle, just like radium's delight. Now it's photonium in the air, in every product, every bite. But darling, can't you see? It's the gamma shine at night. Photonium girls, they shimmer, they dazzle, but beneath the surface it's a dangerous razzle. Once it was radium, now it's this silent mist.
Hello everybody, welcome.
We've come full circle, but history's twist.
Call in to these shows at 709-589 4406. Sheiks. A really good show for you tonight. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. We're doing one of those time machine shows where we go back. This is left over from the anniversary of this year. I think we've done 8 shows for the anniversary, 8 Fukushima shows. They were challenging shows too. This story is from March 13, 2011. And let's cover the poll. Should nuclear experts and scientists and journalists who covered up Fukushima meltdowns lose their degrees and their jobs? There wasn't enough room there for me to get in and go to jail. Some of them should probably get the death penalty. Here we go. So March the 13th, the accident happened, the event happened. I don't know if you can call it an accident when you build it on the tectonic plates with a 3,000-year history of earthquakes and tsunamis. They're only 40 miles from the tectonic plates. In the scale of a tectonic plate, you're on the tectonic plate, right? What you see in there, we got the video. I dug up the video for Reactor 3. I know what you're saying, Dan, about friggin' time. Yeah, it's been a couple of months. A screen grab taken. So just on the 13th, this picture is taken. Japan is 12 hours ahead of us, right? So in Japan, I think it's the 14th. A screen grab taken from the new footage by the Japanese public broadcaster shows the moment of a hydrogen explosion. So that narrative was written in stone right away when it simply... That's Reactor 3 detonation. It was the same size as that building right there. And if you look at it, what you're going to see is the fuel pool and the assemblies falling back down, but the plume keeps traveling up, right? See how fast those 2 big chunks fell back down, 3 big chunks fell back down? There's one on that side, 2 on the other side. Look how quick they come down. And look at the trail they leave behind them. That's the actual reactor core. Reactor 3. And because these are complicated shows typically, we just take our time and explain your way through it. So make sure everybody got a really good foundation to work with about the reactors. So Reactor 1 blew up on Saturday. Reactor 3 blew up on the 14th in Japan's 13th in North America because there's a 12-hour difference. All right, so I'm hoping I got a really good way of explaining this. Let's do this one more time. So here's the explosion. Now at the top of the buildings, each of the buildings are 8 reactor cores. This has been omitted from the narratives, but not on the 16th, that was acknowledged. we'll actually cover that too coming up in a tiny bit. So here's a reactor. That's Fukushima type reactor. There's 70 of them in the United States for the same reactor. So as you look back up, now you're looking at the top of the roof. So how could a steel roof make this kind of a plume? How could a steel roof create a plume so massive? Because remember, the buildings were 19 stories. So the question is, what part of that roof, if it didn't melt down, could make a plume like this? There's no part. The only thing up there that could make the plume was inside the fuel pool. And once the fuel is exposed to oxygen, it immediately ignites. Same as like a flash in your camera ignites. The old flash for cameras used to be zirconium flashes. And they had a glass, and the old 1920, 30 cameras have a big stick would come up with a round top on it, would break the glass, and then the zirconium, which is the same stuff that coats the fuel rods and the pellets, uranium, plutonium pellets. So in the camera, it was designed to get a flash at the same time you're pushing the button, so it ignites, right, when it's exposed to oxygen. And it gets exposed to oxygen by breaking your glass with the old-fashioned cameras. Similar to an earlier blast, they're talking about Unit 3, at a different unit of the facility. And that people within 12 miles were ordered inside. They were ordered. This is not like, you don't have these attributes for coal, gas, oil plants, for instance, just nuclear. And then if you stay in your house, then you're going to get an absurd dose. If you try to leave, you're going to get an absurd dose. It's not an industry that is friendly to anything with replicating cells. Ordered inside their homes. An Associated Press journalist felt the blast 30 miles away. So, and that's what it was a blast. And this is slower motion on top of that. This is like 50% speeds. And you can see the fuel pools, 8 reactor cores, and the reactor core ejected, right out of the building. At the top of the buildings, are 8 fuel pools. And so this is Frank von Hippel, a professor. He's going to explain to you that part of it.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers, ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right. Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable, and it's consistent with the theory that it really did dry out, because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged, and therefore was the hottest, and therefore the water would have boiled off more rapidly.
Now, it could be more. Explosions. Now, they felt, like you said, they felt it 25 miles away, or 30 miles, not kilometers, but miles away. And the blast explosion, which is an appropriate. Hidehiko said the reactor's inner containment vessels holding nuclear rods was intact. That's clearly not true. Let me speed this particular video up, I think, to say 150%. Let me do that again, 150%. That looks more realistic, don't it? Yeah, that looks about right. Now, we have other ways of quantifying that the fuel pool was ejected out of the building. This picture, this was released on March the 17th. So this was released on day 6. And any academic in the industry that's honest, even for a split second, which is very hard to find, by the way, will tell you that the fuel pool and the reactor cores are gone, or at least would have acknowledged it to themselves. Most likely they will lie to you, even if they're your uncle. They will lie to you. Allaying some fears of the risk to the environment and the public. I had a friend of mine, his wife's uncle was a professor at MIT in the United States. And they basically dismissed it. But anyway, you know how persistent I can be. And so she actually reached out to her uncle, and he said there was no meltdowns or explosions at the reactor. Which is clearly a blatant lie, which I knew at the time, right? When she told me that, I said, well, hang on a second, I'll show you something. And I showed her that picture, basically. I said, so are you telling me that that didn't happen? She said, no, but my uncle is. I said, well, your uncle's a sack of shit. She said, well, he's a professor at MIT, Dana. I said, yeah, he's a lying professor at MIT, you meant to say. And she said, I don't know about that. I said, well, what part about that is it you can't wrap your mind around? It took a few weeks, but she finally had to concede. But it shows that blockage that people can have. It's a very frightening thing, right? Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of North America. This was March the 19th. So what would cause a plume to cover most of North America, the North Atlantic, the Caribbean, Canadian, East Coast? There's a lot of radioactive studies about the radioactive fallout. This one was based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. All of them basically covers the planet within 30 days, every study out there. The entire nuclear core was injected into the environment. The cover-up of a massive explosion at the Fukushima Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. It was plutonium mixed oxide, where they reclaim uranium, reclaim plutonium from old fuel, which is a monstrous thing to do, by the way. It's illegal in Canada and the United States. It's a monstrosity. It's an absolute spineless, atrocious evil. It's wicked. It's monstrous. It's odious. The expert, it seems the blast wasn't from the hydrogen ejection of fuel parts. Exploding vortexes suggest a steam explosion. Steam explosion is where the reactor dries out all the water that's there. When it's reintroduced to water, the water evaporates or expands so fast. So a liter will expand, say, for instance, 1,200, 1,300 feet. I can't remember anymore for some reason. I need to look it back up. It's just we got so many numbers. I got no real excuses. That's the one I'm coming up with. Actually, I got a million excuses. Which one do you want to hear? Entire nuclear core was injected. I got no honest one, though. I know the difference. I just can't remember it. I'm getting senile. It must be. The entire nuclear core ejected into the environment. I can wrap my mind around that statement, though. Ejection of the fuel parts. And that's somebody who's not living in denial. When you look at these two original pictures, this was the two. There was 4 or 5 like this that showed up originally. When you put two of them together, there's the explosion to your left, and there's the back of reactor 3. You're facing the ocean. So when you see that, if you're an academic, you know it's gone. You're not going to pretend it's still there, right? But this this was a grainish footage. We don't have footage of reactor 4 exploding for some reason. Even 14 years later, we know it exists because we have reactor 1 and 3 exploding. So why wouldn't you get reactor 4 exploding? Idano said the nuclear reactor's inner containment vessels. Now, that person knows nothing about nuclear. This is a guy who didn't even sleep for the first 72 hours. And no matter what was happening, he was telling the media. He was like Big Dad Bob. Where he said there was no Americans in Baghdad, where you could hear the explosions going off in the background. And all the media was right there. He was at the airport. Remember that video clip? Allaying some fears of the risk to the environment and the public. There is, he was lying. It was a bald-faced lie, and he was in the know, so he knew difference. And so they've been doing this ever since. So how can you ever trust anything in the nuclear industry after what they've done to you? How does that work? And how do you quantify that, justify? How do you see past what they've done to you? Because you're making a terrible mistake. The Unit 3 reactor has been under emergency watch for a possible explosion as pressure built up there following a hydrogen blast Saturday in the facility's Unit 1. That was the Reactor 1 explosion. And again, what could make that explosion? So when you look at the top of the building, there's nothing there unless you look at the fuel pool. But there's nothing at the roof that can create an explosion like this. There's nothing. Like the roof is just metal. Some insulation, whatever. But the roof itself is not capable of making a plume. That's a massive plume. These are 19-story buildings. Think of 19-story apartment buildings, 65-meter buildings, 190 feet buildings. But there's nothing up there to make that, only the fuel pool. Just hours after Monday's explosion, Reactor 3, which was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor, TEPCO, which is not a nuclear expert, they don't make nuclear, they hire operators, said a third reactor, this one at the Fukushima Unit 2, so this is the same site reactor, this is the third reactor, had lost its cooling, well, they all lost their cooling capacity when the tsunami struck. So the way they framed that narrative, it was like it lost it on Monday. That simply wasn't true. It lost it on the same day as all the reactors lost it, which could lead to overheating and an explosion similar to the previous two blasts. The people who wrote this story were clearly not journalists. This was the International Atomic Energy Agency. Little parrots, little maggots. Plant workers were preparing to inject seawater to cool down the reactor. I mean, they're malicious, vicious. The International Atomic Energy Agency is subversive, demonic, diabolic. They're terrorists. That's who the International Atomic Energy Agency is, right? Which could lead to overheating and explosions similar to the previous two blasts. These were two meltdowns. Plant workers were preparing to inject seawater. What are you talking about? Like, once the first reactor blew up, you can't work there. You kicked fuel assemblies, 1,800 pounds of reactor core fuel, and you're talking about 6 million pounds because you had 8 reactor cores in the fuel pools at the top of the buildings. Right? They don't have a repository, so the majority of the 4-decade-old reactors were kept in the worst place possible, the most inconceivable, unimaginable spot. It was, and whoever designed it, it's sickening. It's disgusting. It's sinister. Right? It is odious engineering. They knew they were going to have a meltdown. They built it on a tectonic plate where they got a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis and earthquakes. And it's right on the tectonic plates, and the prevailing winds blow across the Pacific to North America, Canada, United States, and then everywhere else worldwide. And it takes an average of less than 30 days for the entire planet to be blanketed in catastrophic radiation fallout. This model, based on TEPCO's numbers, plutonium-239 dispersal based on 20 days and 21 days of radioactive fallout. So every single isotope has its own model. And when you add them all together, because you have to, they're all in the same plume, right? Prime Minister Nato Khan told reporters, adding that the country's future would be decided by the response to this crisis, would be decided. That's an interesting statement. Why would he frame it that way? At this stage, you confirmed that reactor 1 and 3 blew up, and you hid it away, but you knew for a fact there was 16 extra reactor cores in the 4 fuel pools at the top of. There's 2 at the top of each of the reactors. There's around 8 reactors or more at the top of each of these buildings. There's a 70% chance the magnitude 7 aftershocks could hit Japan in the next 3 days. There's over 1,000 aftershocks, which could pose another risk to an already unstable nuclear reactor. Like when your tectonic plates let go for 400 kilometers and creates a tsunami 60 kilometers away, say, on land for 1,200 kilometers, that's a significant tectonic plate displacement, right? And so it's common sense you're going to have several hundred right away in the first few days. And a lot of them are going to be significant earthquakes on their own. And yet they built the reactors right at ground zero for tectonic plates. Like the idiot of idiots. Or was it on purpose? There's a 70% chance of another earthquake of a magnitude 7, because the Japanese have 2 scales, the Shindu scale and the Richter scale. Aftershock could hit Japan in the next 3 days, which could pose another risk to an already unstable nuclear reactor. In the early morning hours Monday in Japan, authorities declared the lowest level of emergency at Okinawa nuclear disease factory after detecting higher than allowable radiation levels in the air outside the facility. The increase in radioactivity levels may be due to the radioactive materials released by the number 1 reactor, which is interesting because they refuse to acknowledge after this the reactor lost any inventories whatsoever. In fact, right now they're claiming they're going to get fuel of a pool that we know doesn't exist. Uncontrolled. This was the International Atomic Energy Agency, March 30th, 2011. Uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction may be coming from a melted fuel in the number 1 reactor. Just give me a second. My apologies. It's repugnant, right? It's hateful what they're doing to this planet. It's repulsive. It's odious to kill all the species and then pretend that you're the hero. This is an industry that time is long come and gone, and you need to get to war against them. They're going to war against you. Give me just a moment here. I got to download some pictures or put some pictures. That'll work. That'll work. One more. And the spent fuel pools, because you're talking about one spent fuel pool is more reactor cores than the 4 reactors. uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction, uncontrolled. International Atomic Energy Agency. And so it's pretty convenient for them to pretend that this is not happening now. As of August the 24th, 2023, they come out and disavowed everything I showed you. They're claiming, I'm pretty sure that if you go check their site, they're going to even claim the tsunami never went through the nuclear plant. Well, I can guarantee you that it did. But they're claiming the reactors never lost anything, only 2 grams of tritium. Not even the courage to call it tritium-3H. The International Atomic Degenerate Agency now reports the levels have returned to normal. This is shameless. This is just wicked stuff. It's disgusting. It's vile for them to suggest that nothing got out. It's outrageous, right? Good for nothing. Fraudsters is what they are. An explosion Saturday at the Daiichi plant prompted the evacuation of more than 200,000 people living within 12 miles. Like 12 miles is, the whole planet was covered right away. I'll show you more of that coming up. Reports that some radioactive iodine and cesium were released. So whenever you hear something like that, that means they had a major event. To suggest that iodine and cesium, which are brutal, don't get me wrong, are the concern. Neptunium-239 is a huge concern because of the ratio of production. Plutonium, the biggest byproduct is a curium isotope, and Neptunium-239, by the way, decays to plutonium-239 in 2.5 days. It has 10 half-lives, so 29 days before it all converts to plutonium. And because there's so much of it, it's like iodine-129. There's so much of it. And because plutonium-239 in particular, we have studies on the animals, and big old dogs and big old puppies and monkeys. They all died from the single exposure. And they died of multiple tumors. Tumors of the most tumors were the skeleton, and then the lung, and then the liver. And these were catastrophic tumors that took the lives of all the beagle dogs and beagle puppies. They like using beagle dogs and beagle puppies because it's pretty rare for a beagle dog to bite you. And if you're going to be a coward, you might as well be the best cowards you can be. Well, the best cowards, the most disgusting cowards, work for the International Atomic Energy Agency. And who probably wrote most of these stories on top of that. And then the journalists put their name on it. Reports said that some radioactive iodine cesium were released after an explosion blew the roof off a building. And so that journalist should lose their degree. That scientist who wrote it and gave it to the journalist should lose their degree. This is never acceptable, and this is why we're in a massive extinction event. It's because we never hold these diabolical, revolting, nauseating parasites accountable. Officials are presuming that 2 nuclear reactors have now had meltdowns. That's March the 13th. That's March the 13th. In an effort to prevent a meltdown, and this story, we're still in the first story, because telling a lie is a lot of work apparently. And they tell a lie, they go tell a lie, right? They go all out, don't they? Engineers have flooded this reactor unit 1 with seawater after its cooling system failed. But this is 2013. 2013. Or 2011, March 13th. So this is just day 3. There's 2 reactors already melted down. Reactor 3, the explosions were just undeniable, right? They got, well, for me and you, but for them, they go to university to get an education, to get a job, to come out and tell you lies. Then and that's the world you're living in, then you're in real trouble. The government said radiation levels around the Fukushima reactor were not harmful, and that amounts emanating from the plant appears to have decreased after the blast. Well, like when you detonate 8 reactor cores, 9 counting the running reactor core, that's an absurd amount, right? And so, yeah, it will decrease, but it's not going to decrease no matter which reactor blew up there. You can't go back in there and work, right? There's a lot of, you got to do a lot of work to get someone physically back on the ground. You got to send in remote control. Like when the first explosion happens, like reactor 1, you've seen the videos or the pictures. You don't go back in that anywhere. There's nowhere, you can't, your organs will melt in about a minute and a half, no matter where you stood up. You have to send in bulldozers for months to push the heavy stuff into big piles and move it away or bury it temporarily. And that's why they use all the steel plates you'll see. Were not harmful amounts emanating from the plant appeared to decrease, which produced an intensifying cloud of white smoke that swallowed the complex. Well, this wasn't white smoke. Reactor 1. Is that what they were talking about there? Sometimes I get lost. Yeah, reactor 1. Well, here's the explosion of reactor 1. There was nothing there to make the smoke. Only the fuel pool itself. There's nothing at the top of the buildings that's going to make smoke. Because that's what they're telling you. The top of the building blew off. They put a sarcophagus around reactor 1 and kept it there for 5 years. And this is like the worst case scenario. The idea was to try to lower the dose for the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants that don't speak the language that are there because academics are not going near it. And so they built this contraption off-site and then assembled it with gravity. It's all assembled by cranes, by gravity itself, because no one can survive that exposure, see? So when you put, this is like a smokehouse, and just permeating radiation is just circulating in there. So that material that they're taking, they're like those big panels they're adding, when they took that apart, you can take a square foot of that panel to the New York subway and put it inside of a wall, the drywall, and plaster it in. But whoever does it is going to die right away. So you need a lot of people to pull that off. And everybody who walks past that will die that day for thousands of years. And so once you've done that, you can never get near the building again. Because you trap the radiation in. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. Radiation so far is on site and is not at an acute level, lethal level, but is of great concern, NPR's Christopher Joyce reported. That simply wasn't true. Bloomberg came out and reported it was lethal levels off-site. Lethal levels.
For the first time, potentially fatal levels of radiation have been discovered outside the crippled nuclear plant.
So, outside. And he was interviewing Lake Barrett. And he'd done everything he could to make Lake Barrett, former NRC head and who was in charge of 3 Mile Island. Him and Arnie Gunnarsson, the serial killers. I can play the clip for you if you want, Arnie Gunnarsson. Well, I used to send people in for 3 minutes and they get their lifetime radiation dose. Like when you get 3-minute dose, that's what they're calling a lifetime dose, you're getting a lethal dose. The only people that are taking that job ain't getting bonuses, and they came in on a bus and couldn't speak English. Mr. Slick, his wife was a public spokesperson for the nuclear industry for 20 years. Fair winds, right? I can play all kinds of clips of him lying, and I do regularly. Oh. I've been sick all day. I had some kind of strange reaction, a big rash on my chest and on my face. And so, I'm not sure what happened, but it's not fun, I can tell you that much. And it's been going on for a couple of days with me, so I'm assuming I'm allergic to something. And try to get rid of everything that's new to me, and just stick to a couple of things that I've always done okay with, like just drink water only. It could be the tea. I changed my tea up. So it's been pretty rough. Let me see here. Where's my page? Oh. James Luce had donated $300 last night. Bless your heart, James. My goodness. And he sent me some really good news at the same time. I just went to bed and I got back. I heard the phone go off. And I came out because I don't bring the phone in the room, right? And I read this little thing he sent me, and it was like one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. A long time, actually. It definitely cheered me up. In the towns near the reactors, residents are lining up to be tested for radiation exposure. This was up in Koriyama City. Koriyama City, in case you don't know, has got a big population. Where's the population? Right here. It's got 341,000 people. So the population is your second from the left at the top. The next one is the disposition just of cesium-137, which is nasty, don't get me wrong. And there's incredible numbers. But there's got to be more cesium. There's 100 times more strontium-90 for every cesium that's produced. So Koriyama, where there was 1,500 people, was it? Yeah, 1,500 people were tested. This is still on the 13th. And this is the problem when you're trying to cover the Time Machine headlines. Because that's a single. We're still doing a single story. We're 38 minutes into the show, and what we're trying to do is just we're not trying to challenge every lie, because that's the only story. It will take me at least 2 hours or more to get through that single story if I challenged every lie in the story with the documentation. So it's the whole thing is insane, but every story is like this. So you only challenge. You challenge the lies in each story to tell a story over your show. Because you can challenge the same lie in story after story a lot of the times. Okay, so Koriyama City, let's boot ahead Koriyama City 2013. 2.5 years later, November the 4th, 2013. So they abandoned Koriyama City, which is a nuclear wasteland. But the 1,500 people they tested had no radiation. But yet the school is using boxes, wood boxes on top of that, of water bottles. So they had all the students to bring water bottles to school for a few weeks. And what they wanted to do was fill the bottles up with water. You're probably not going to believe me, but this is the story. This is the media story. I'm not making it up. They actually lined the bottles up inside and outside to lower the dose, shield the students. So the whole story, it just seems like it's out of some bizarre fictional, right? Something Stephen King wrote or something. Surely the nuclear industry can't be this cruel, you know what I mean? They're the cruelest. There's nothing any crueler than the nuclear industry. It's nauseating, isn't it? The bottles are filled with water, placed inside of square boxes which are stacked around the classroom to shield the students. But so you're talking about, because cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet. So first off, they're refusing to acknowledge that it's in the school. And second off, they're refusing to acknowledge that if you got to go to this extreme to drop the radiation dose a little tiny bit, it's time to move out of it. You can't keep kids there. Right? And you can't be their reader. So these are teachers who are not smart enough or, purposely dumbed down by the nuclear industry. Because it's outside the evacuation zone, the government had barely conducted any decontamination activities. But what was interesting about Koriyama City, 340,000 people, 30 miles away from the reactors, is that every building and every house in that community, a city, 340,000 people, was entitled to be decontaminated. But you can't decontaminate a house or a school or a mall or a bank or police station or nothing, or a hospital. And so these are human lab rats. Okay, back to the other story. That's the last part of that story. That story took us almost 45 minutes by the time I get through it. Authorities were planning to distribute iodine to residents in the area. According to the despicable, degenerate, nefarious International Atomic Energy Agency, iodine counteracts the effects of radiation. Like, what are you talking about? There's gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. The gamma, and there's other gammas besides cesium-137 is a gamma, and there's other, and iodine-131 is a gamma, for instance. But there's many, many other isotopes are gamma. And so iodine here is only meant to keep the iodine-131 out of the thyroid gland. But it don't counteract the effects of the radiation, right? Because it's still going to go somewhere if the iodine is if the thyroid is blocked up with fresh iodine, which has to be done about 48 hours before you come in contact with it, which they didn't have time clearly. And they're in a nuclear wasteland, as I just explained to you. But the reality was that officials had sharply raised the radiation levels for residents to get the iodine pills after the meltdown 75 times higher than it should have been. So they're suggesting the International Atomic Energy Agency said that the authorities were planning to distribute the iodine according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, but yet they raised it 75 times higher than what it was before the meltdown. Can anybody stomach these people for a second? And I understand the chaos, right? I was horror. Everybody, that was old enough to appreciate what was going on and looked at, and at that time, videos were basically new, right, for the internet. Low quality was out there. But at this stage, just before that, but at this stage, say 2004, they were pretty bad quality what was going on. But in 2011, rather, the quality was pretty good for live videos and everything else. And so we were getting absurd footage coming out. And when you look at it now, and because you got the luxury of hindsight, and you start to realize all the stuff you looked at, you can see, but there was a lot went on that year. Like Gaddafi was, they pulled an exorcism on him with a big 2x4, like a big fudge stick. Prince William got married. There was Mubarak was disposed. Apple, Steve Jobs died. Kim Jong-il died that year. There was Benghazi. Was Benghazi 2011? I can't remember. I got a court order to take the video down I had with Benghazi and Hillary Clinton. A court order from YouTube. Sent me a court order to take the video down. Not like a takedown, but an actual court order from a judge and a court. And so what I done was I took it down, and then I just reformatted it and posted it again a few hours later. That's how friggin' arrogant that gets. All right, yay, another story. Holy shit, 2 stories in one night. That's almost too much to take, isn't it? Because you tell so many lies, you can't challenge all the lies, but just challenging a chunk of them took 45 minutes. Because they sure like to lie. I suppose I should try to challenge every lie. I really should. Because that gives me a lot more shows, right? I don't have to work to go find. I know where they're to and just... Nasty, nasty, nasty people. Here we go. U.S. nuclear officials. This is March the 28th, 2011. March the 28th. March the 28th. Like, you know what they were telling you, that they were working on the reactor after reactor 1 and 3 exploded. They were there putting salt water in the reactor 2. That simply wasn't true. The helicopters couldn't even go there, so how could a human go there, right? Japan nuclear plant is slowly recovering. The United States nuclear officials. I don't know if they named themselves in this story or not. I can't remember. U.S. nuclear officials said Tuesday, it'll be in the description if it's true, that Japan's troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant is slowly being brought under control. This is the picture they gave you, and they tell you it's slowly being brought under control. And this is the picture right above the sentence. Excuse me. No, it's being brought under control. Look at it. It's totally under control. Imagine you own a 19-story building, a 65-meter building, apartment building, and you get a text message from one of your tenants saying, hey, have you seen your building? And you contact the manager, and he tweets you this picture and says, no, it's under control. You're like, honey, we got to get on a plane, get back home. Get all the insurance company, the building's gone. There wasn't a single person in the nuclear industry that knew the building was gone. That's pretty amazing. The experts, not a single expert, knew the reactors were gone. And he show you the picture. Look at it. It's not gone. Thank God. We're so lucky. It could be worse, Dana. Yeah, call me. 709-589-4406. I want to hear how fucking worse that could have been. That was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. Led to at least a partial meltdown of 3 of the station's reactors. It was 4 reactors. Like, pretending reactor 4 wasn't destroyed is... I'll bring up a picture. So the original picture... that's what it would have looked like originally. And so saying that that's not destroyed, that's a 19-story, 190 foot, 190 feet. It's a 19-story building. And anybody who says it's not that big should be thrown off it. I have Peter Lyon. He's a professional lawyer, I'm sure. Acting Assistant Secretary for the Office of the Nuclear Energy at the United States Department of Energy. Wow, that's quite the handle they got there. Said current information suggests the plants are in a slow recovery. A recovery. So that's a recovery now, is it? Right, this plant is slowly being brought under control, Dana. Well, you got big so difficult. However, long-term cooling of the reactor and the pools. So these stories are strictly about deception, deceit, misrepresentation. Like, we all had that picture and that picture by the 14th. And everybody was busy looking at the tsunami. I spent a lot of time looking at it myself, right? It was like, oh my goodness. And on boats I was looking at, because it's hard to get footage, hard to get any information. It was hard to figure out what was what originally for a long time. They were very deceptive on which reactor was which. Most of the stories, including these, you do get some pictures. Like, you won't see those pictures in the media anymore, I can tell you that much. Bill Bouchard of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC, said reactor 1, 2, and 3 at the Fukushima plant are damaged reactor cores. The water levels at the spent fuel pools are vary, which might pose the risk of further radiation exposure. Well, we got the clip there somewhere. I don't know. I looked for it earlier. Let me try that one more time. I haven't got much hope of finding it for some reason. Well, I can find it, but we have problems with playback for some reason. They need to be reformatted, I think, or something, right? What am I looking for? C-SPAN? Oh, didn't give it to me. Yeah. Let me do that. I looked for it earlier, so actually I already got it typed in there. I don't understand, because it wasn't that long ago we played it, right? Bill Bouchard. They were waiting for Jaco to show up at Congress for updates on Fukushima, right? It's not even going to look for it. Let's try that again. Who knows? Yeah. And I had imported, I had formatted a lot of those videos, and I can't find it. It was supposed to be right at the top of my page. You know how you got your folder, and then you got folders inside the folder, and then the ones you want to show up at the very top, you'll put like a 1 in front of it, and an A, 1 and an A and a B, or maybe, or something like that. Who knows? Oh, no way. So Bill Bouchard, now I chopped the video up. So he was asked questions. They were like, "You're the expert, the expert. You're the expert." And you'll hear that over and over. I get sick. I'll start chopping it out. The expert. You're here to teach us. And Bill Bouchard goes, I'd rather not say. But he was there to replace, they're waiting for Jasko to show up, to testify on the U.S. efforts to assist the Japanese following a series of nuclear accidents. It's only a minute and a half, but let's listen to the experts.
We're here to get a briefing on the ongoing crisis associated with the nuclear power plants in Japan. I'm very privileged that we have the Executive Director for Operations at the NRC here, Bill Bouchard.
I couldn't speculate on that.
An expert, a true expert as well.
Again, I wouldn't wish to speculate.
So we feel very blessed that you could come and stand in until the chairman comes, and we really do welcome you.
Again, I can't speculate.
Well, teaching all of us the lessons that we have to take away from what is happening.
I couldn't speculate on that. What we believe is a significant amount of fuel damage in the three operating reactors, units 1, 2, and 3, which were operating at the time of the earthquake. And then because of the spent fuel problems that are in Unit 4 of that reactor facility. All of those factors taken into combination, if that same type of source term, that same type of radiological problem existed in the United States, our recommendation to state governments would be to evacuate out to 50 miles.
Well, that's a really good point, because I'm asking you, do you know how many people live within 50 miles of San Onofre nuclear power plant?
I do not know.
Well, I'm going to tell you how many people. 7.4 million people.
What do you say when the experts, because they're on TV or on C-SPAN, right? That's how they set that up on purpose to play out that way. Let me play it one more time. I'm going to jump in the video and stop it.
We're here to get a briefing on the ongoing crisis associated with the nuclear power plants in Japan. I'm very privileged that we have the executive director for operations at the NRC here, Bill Borchardt.
I couldn't speculate on that.
An expert, a true expert as well.
Again, I wouldn't wish to speculate.
So we feel very blessed that you could come and stand in until the chairman comes, and we really do welcome you.
Again, I can't speculate.
Well, teaching all of us the lessons that we have to take away from what is happening.
I couldn't speculate on that. What we believe is a
Now, March the 16th, this was done on, right? All the reactors, right? This is what they were looking at. And so his job is to speculate. His job is to inform the population through C-SPAN and Congress. And so him and Jasko worked this out with the International Atomic Energy Agency directing them. It's just spineless.
Significant amount of fuel damage in the three operating reactors, units 1, 2, and 3.
So 1, 2, and 3. There's the heat signature. That's unit 2, is it? Yeah, unit 2. That was the only one that didn't, per se, fall to pieces. But it went China system syndrome,
which were operating at the time of the earthquake. And then because of the spent fuel problems that are in Unit 4 of that
Unit 4
reactor facility. All of those factors taken into combination, if that same type...
Forget that stuff. That's Unit 4. So he's saying 1, 2, and 3 had significant events, but they didn't want to speculate on anything when they're supposed to speculate. That's what they're there for. Of course, they're not in Japan. They don't know everything. But there's like 2 and 2 certainly makes 4, and 2 and 2 certainly makes 22 to the expert. But that's reactor 4. Even today, 14 years later, they refuse to acknowledge that melted down. That's not just dishonorable. These are assassins to humanity and the species. The Unit 2 spent fuel pool has now started receiving fresh water. This is on the 28th. Hello, everybody. Hello. I just had antivirus pop up and drive me nuts. Should nuclear experts and scientists and journalists who covered up Fukushima meltdowns lose their degrees and jobs. Man, look at the brutal censorship they're doing to me. 135 views and 132 views. That's absurd. That's absurd to suggest that that's all. I've been doing the show for over a decade. Like 162 views. Like they are in panic mode. That's panic mode, eh? I now started receiving fresh water. Unit 2 was gone. This is the 28th. You can't challenge every lie. Here's the problem, right? Fukushima nuclear report was so shocking they decided to treat it as if it didn't even exist. Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels for weeks. And that was just a xenon 133, like xenon measurements. It's got a very short half-life. But what I meant is that there was a criticality ongoing, but in the same plume, if you got that much of xenon 133, and he did, like you're talking about 1 million atoms per square meter disposition on the ground, it meant total saturation with cesium, uranium, plutonium, curium, and the list is very long. You can't just have the plumes can't just be a single isotope. They have to be all the isotopes, and there's up to 1,000 different isotopes. And like the iodine 129 studies from Canada, from Ottawa, Canada, are 220 million atoms per cubic meter of rainfall. These absurd numbers with a 15 million year half-life. That never goes away. They'll be here for 150 million years, destroying the thyroid glands of every species. And you and me. And now this study is really important all these years later. Fukushima, the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Obesity rates doubled Japan's average. An excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis, which in Fukushima covered the whole planet in perpetual radioactive fallout, that is never going to go away. This stuff doesn't turn to fairy dust, and the dinosaurs will be here again, maybe, before that happens. Excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. America, 74% now are obese because they were poisoned by Japan, same as Canada. Canada was worse, though, because we had removed all restrictions after 93 days on food. The food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for a decade. Canada wasn't one of them. So a lot of the most radioactive food, and Japan was producing 1 billion pounds at each prefecture. So at least 14 billion pounds a year coming out of that area. They didn't stop growing it. And there's 94% in Canada are obese. In Russia, it's about 3%. So what is making everybody obese? And this is post-Fukushima. And then you're seeing Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and Down syndrome and schizophrenia off the charts, completely off the charts, which is emblematic of radiation. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. This was 2011, the Japan Times, one of the biggest medias in Japan. So they were warning you. They were being blatant. They were warning you. As the public, possibly worldwide. No, as the public worldwide. The Non-Regulatory Commission / Nuclear Regulatory Commission Operations Director Bill Bouchard said that more than half of the 104 nuclear reactors in the United States have already received renewed licensing for another 20 years. There's the same gigawatts today as there was in 1996. And that the rest are expected to apply for a similar license. He said he sees no technical reason to slow the process. Right, we covered one last night, Okinawa or something. 2.5 gigawatt, got a 20-year extension. As at Fukushima, the U.S. reactors are designed for a station blackout of only a short duration, just a few hours. 11 U.S. reactors are designed to cope with a station blackout lasting 8 hours. So if you have a tornado or you have a significant storm, you're in trouble after 8 hours. You got 8 hours to get out of Dodge. And if you have a significant event, you can't get out, as were the reactors in Japan. So the reactors in Japan had at best 8 hours. 8 hours. That's really important, isn't it? But you know what? Thank God Reactor 4 didn't blow up, is all I can say. See, clearly that's not blown up. You can see the fuel. It's invisible. It's 150 feet above the stump there, but it's up there. The media said so. I can see the whole world just snap one of these days. And you'd be like a third world country where everybody's looking for a journalist or a nuclear scientist. It won't be a bad day. Another lesson to be learned from the incident. You had 36 reactor cores melt down over 4 or 5 days. 5 days, rather. Is the vulnerability of the spent nuclear fuel rods. All U.S. reactors have more irradiated fuel in the spent fuel pool than exists in the reactor cores. Of course you do. They're storing decades of reactor cores at the top of both of the buildings. All those designs. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of the building. The reactor cores at the top of the building. These are 190-foot building. Do you see a 190-foot building? Well, guess what? You're in real trouble. You need to get educated, and you need to start getting busy and pushing back. The industry can't handle anybody pushing back. Like, pushing back against the nuclear industry is a nightmare. All U.S. reactors have the spent fuel pools cooled by fewer and less reliable systems than are provided by the reactor core. At all, which means, like, the fuel pools need to have circulating water. You don't have to lose the water, you just have to stop circulating the water and they'll melt down. Or they'll bulge and lose their inventories, and that will heat up and then it'll boil off and catch fire. And that'll all happen in very quick moments. And less reliable systems than are provided by the reactor core. At all U.S. reactors, the spent fuel pool is housed in less robust containment. No, containment. There is no containment. It's in a pool. It boils off 120,000 liters each day. So after it's got, like, in 4 days it's empty. Then surrounds the reactor core. Because the earthquake was so big, it spilled a lot of water right away. Because of the violent shaking, right? That's why you see the detonations are so significant. And the plutonium mixed oxide reactor, they cook off about 200,000 degrees hotter. And that's why the explosion is so significant in them. Because the aerosol, the uranium, plutonium, and everything. And so when you have an explosion, when you finally have a spark, or you displace all the oxygen. When you introduce this oxygen back in there, it'll detonate, right? But all you do need a spark, and the spark will come from the zirconium cladding the minute it's exposed. And this will, but now once it catches fire, it'll burn underwater. So it'll quickly boil off the whole pool, which will ignite everything. And that's what we've seen in all 4 of the reactors. The exact thing we've seen. As the Japanese officials try to cool reactors. You can't try to cool reactors. You had detonations. Don't matter how brave, how many Fukushima 50s you got, you can't survive in the environment. It melts your organs. You can have the bravest people on the planet, all the samurais on the planet, but you can't get in there because it melts your organs. Even the Hulk, his organs will melt. Even Superman tried to go there, his organs melted. I bet you didn't know that little fact, did you? There was concern about how far radiation from the crippled plant could spread. Really? Tends to concentrate in the testicles. Oh boy. Said the bear and the goat and the deer. 360 plus atoms of radioactive sulfur per day may have been inhaled by Californians after Fukushima. Per day. Concentrates in the testicles. Gee, I wonder why we're not having many more babies anymore. Where have all the insects and birds and bees gone, I wonder? Unprecedented spike of 1,500 atoms of the sulfur. So that's two different studies. Or is it the same study? I thought it was two different studies. It was detected in the California air per cubic meter. This was the Xenon 133 at 1 million atoms per cubic meter, or per square meter underground radioactive fallout. Nuclear industry tried to bury the truths. And UC Berkeley, there's a lot of them. Carl Vetter was one of them. But there's a lot of academics were showing up in the meeting. They were all denying Fukushima even happened. Told the public there is no plume. And rain with 20 million particles of radioactive iodine. This was a Canadian study from Simon Fraser University where they tried to claim that 20 million actual particles, ionizing, radiated, atomized, and aerosol particles, only get 10 pulses of energy a minute. And because he was getting the $6 million from the nuclear industry, right? He'd done that presentation, and at the end of the presentation, he's for conflict of interest, I get $6 million a year from the nuclear industry. So there's no conflict of interest because he told you that, which is the most absurd thing imaginable. So they covered it up. And then you had 220 million atoms. In another study out of Ottawa, Canada, like 20 million particles is 20 million pulses of energy a second. 220 million atoms, iodine 129, which doesn't pulse very far, but it's certainly enough to each pulse to kill hundreds of thousands of cells and chromosomes and DNA smashed apart of every species. And all of these, when you finally put it all together, this is still just a fraction of the acknowledgement. These are absurd numbers. But so all the species are in the forest and everywhere else are full body X-rays. All the humans too are getting full body X-rays. And that'll cause catastrophic problems for reproduction for the species right away. So if you go back 2021, the 10th year of Fukushima anniversary, so to speak, in January of that year, there was 736 pictures released. And we're going to go through about 40 of them fairly quick, because there was a few abnormalities. So this was the original first picture, and I found, I can't remember, was it 10 or 12 downloads at a Chinese site that I had translated. It was about Fukushima, and all the links said TEPCO. I was like, oh, what the hell is this? So I clicked on it, and I started downloading these pictures. And I said, well, what the hell is this? So I downloaded everything, and then when I unpacked the files, I was getting these pictures from a drone. It didn't make any sense to me. So I'm clicking through these pictures, and this is up in the southeast corner. You're a long way away from the reactors. You're in the extremities away. These are big sites, right? And you can see the pictures going in a direction where it's headed down that direction, so to speak. Like, okay. And I don't know what I'm looking at, but this is drone pictures. So I said, oh, that's the reactors coming up to my left. And I didn't really appreciate it, right? I was clicking away because I was looking over here and I was looking over there and I was glancing. So when you're just glancing around, you won't notice the fact of what I'm going to show you, right? Just glance around. You're not really noticing up here. There's something going on up there. was that all the reactors were pixelated out. But you don't really notice it. See, you're looking all over the place trying to get a handle on why were these pictures released and how come we can't find any information about it. So anyway, I get down to about here, and I was like, oh shit, right? I'm looking, I can see something pixelated. I was like, what's that? So I got to zoom in on it, of course. And once I started zooming in on it, I was like, oh no. Oh, I got that on the double pictures, the double screens. Let me fix that. Because that's how I make the videos, where I'll put one video on one side, one video on the other side, and I'll play them at the same time to see what they chopped out. Just give me 1 second, I'll fix that. Damn computers. Right there. It shouldn't be. Oh, no, that's not it. That's not it. I don't know anymore. I guess it doesn't matter. Now I'm screwed because I got everything screwed up. I'll come back to it some other time. Have I got done to myself yet? Don't worry about it, I'll figure it out. Alright, let's get back after it. So, I started noticing all these pictures. It was the same. Now, when you look now, because I'm zoomed in, you can see everything is pixelated up there, right? Look at the pixelation. I was like, what the hell is going on? I was like, oh shit. Oh crap. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Why is everything pixelated out? I still, you had 736 pictures, so you had to zoom in on every picture. And then you start to realize what was going on. These pictures were released because they want you to see this. This was the common spent fuel pool. It's right behind reactor 4 up there, and that's reactor 3 in the center, and reactor 2 over in the top left-hand corner. But behind it were transport truck containers all piled up because the tsunami ran right through there, right around that building, and through all those reactors. So this was the common spent fuel pool. Why was that pixelated out? Why was that pixelated out? Which is over there now, right? The common spent fuel pool. That's reactor 4. And behind it, you can see the top of it now. You're facing towards the ocean that way. And these are transport truck containers. So why was the common spent fuel pool in the top left-hand corner? Or I'll just move myself over there to make sure you're not mistaken. This here is the common spent fuel pool. This is right across the street from reactor 4. It's right on the same street as reactor 4. And the tsunami came right through and piled up all those transport truck containers and it went back out. Now this is not a very tall building. And I showed you the tsunami earlier running through the site, I think. Well, one picture of it. Let me see if I got one more picture there. Yeah, I got the same picture showed you earlier, but that's okay. So that's the tsunami running through. So that would have ran right through and piled up all those containers. So the common spent fuel pool would be like Chernobyl on steroids. If the spent fuel catches fire, says a nuclear engineer who worked at a Hidehiko plant, he's talking about the spent fuel pools at the top of the buildings. Each reactor holds 3,450 assemblies of 6 million pounds. Each assembly is 100 fuel rods. Each rod is 18 feet, or 18 pounds, and they're 12 feet long. 1,800 pounds of fuel assembly. So Fukushima radiation still circling the globe. Levels are consistently rising and falling in a 40-day cycle. That's a year later. Renewed nuclear chain reaction feared at the spent fuel storage pool. So that is quite interesting. Another chain reaction. So they're acknowledging 2 chain reactions had taken place at the common spent fuel pool across the street. Is that why it's pixelated out? Now, they won't acknowledge that anything I showed you tonight is real. Despite all the headlines we got, all the pictures we got. The Fisher stories now would never even happen. It was only 2 grams of tritium got out. Fukushima radiation inventory is 30 to 40 times as high as in Chernobyl. That's per building. It's actually a lot worse than that. Because Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. Chernobyl was a brand new reactor. Chernobyl was a very small reactor. Fukushima is pure uranium, pure plutonium. And they're very large reactors. And that the common spent fuel pool, or the storage, they don't have a repository. The storage is at the top of the buildings. And so the estimates were about 100 Chernobyls per fuel pool, or for reactor core. The problem was there was 8 reactor cores at the top of the buildings, plus the reactor core. You're talking about close to 900 reactors, Chernobyl-style reactor, graphite reactors. But because these are pure uranium, pure plutonium, the inventory of the most harshest, the most horrific isotopes is dramatic. So the common spent fuel pool being sprayed with water contained 6,375 spent fuel assemblies. This is March the 22nd. This is from a story on March the 21st at the International Atomic Energy Agency. So, but when you start putting all this together, clearly you had a nuclear meltdown and then a criticality event at the common spent fuel pool. And then the radioactive fallout is so enormous, it remains dispersed throughout the water column of all oceans and rivers and streams and lakes and estuaries. Not just cesium, but if you got cesium, you got all the other isotopes. Okay. So the common spent fuel pool is over there. Why is it pixelated out? But what was really interesting was as you moved away from it, you're going, that's the dry cache storage over there. You're headed towards reactor 5 and 6, which is quite a distance north. Now that top tank up there should be in between those 2 tanks. And you can see that the ocean was so high, and this tank wasn't full, so it had a lot of oxygen in it. And because the pressure was at least 14 pounds per square inch, 15 pounds per square inch, because the ocean came in. Now the ocean came in very fast on top of that. But the carnage caused to it is like you spun it or something, right? That was caused by the volume inside of it shrinking because it was under an atmosphere 33 feet of water at least. Across the street from it was the common spent fuel, or the dry cache storage. And clearly the tsunami, which is way lower than the reactors, the tsunami clearly ran right through that. So quite a few of them would have got washed out to sea. We know some of them were still inside the buildings. But then you had reactor 5 and 6, the green buildings up there. And right away you can see reactor 6 and the turbine building are completely pixelated out. So why is reactor 6 and the turbine building completely pixelated out, and large portions of the vent stacks for the fuel pools? Very sinister. So whoever released these pictures, with no fanfare, was never covered by anybody else on the planet. As far as I know, I'm the only person who's ever covered this material. And I've done an entire presentation on all 736 pictures. And you'll see that video last week or something in my... I'll just bring it up for you, actually. Later, if you go to my front page, right, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 videos, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the 8 video back to 736 mystery pictures is what I call them. The mystery pictures. And all of those 14th anniversary videos, they're incredible documentation in each of them. Hi, everybody. Should nuclear experts, scientists, and journalists who covered the Fukushima meltdown lose their degrees? Yes. Here we go. We only got 5 more. That we'll get into the next story. I got to play a little clip, though, before we do that. I just got to remember what the clip is. Don't ask me. Okay, so then there's another abnormality. See it up there? So you can see here how the cars are crystal clear, so to speak. Just bear with me. The problem is some good stuff coming up. Just got to get my shit together. I went the wrong way. Here, I think I need that one. Yeah. Again, I got the double. I got the double screen. Why have I got double screens for? I don't know. I don't understand that at all. Is everything going to be double? Yeah. I have to address that later. But I'm gonna zoom in, so it probably won't even matter anyway. I'll move everything over here in a second, just to get through this part right there. So you see up there, what the hell is that? Why is all of that pixelated out? And that's up in the southeast corner of the site. It's in the southeast corner of the site. Now that was the marker we were using to identify it. Let me see if I can find a map for you of that site. Just before we move on here. My apologies. Problem is, it's a difficult story, right? Is it? I thought it was right there. It is right there, but I have no problem with it. Oh well, I can't find the right map. It should be right there for me. One more try. I know, it's a pain in the nurse. Let's keep going. I can't. Anyways, up in the southeast corner, it's quite a long ways away from the reactor. And so I don't know what's going on there, but the way the pictures were taken, they drew you a line right to this from the reactors. Right, and then the next set are driving you the line straight back towards the ocean again where the reactors are. Japan nuclear disaster. That's the problem with the whole story is, in order to challenge their narrative, okay, so I showed you that picture of that video of 736 pictures. Well, this section was chopped out of it that I'm going to play for you. It's 2 minutes long. And so they chopped this section out after 12 hours. I compared the videos side by side because I'm recording the videos also, not just YouTube, right? So I record my own copies. They're typically 100 gigabytes. And so then I can play both of them and find the spots where they chopped out large sections. And this was the section that they chopped out. I'm going to play it for you. It's about 2 minutes long. And it's worth your time. Here we go. Just to be clear, the International Atomic Energy Agency chopped these 2 minutes out of my 736 mystery picture video that I showed you a few minutes ago. This is the back of reactor 4. Those stacks, they look close, but they're actually not. They're so lethal, you'll die right away. If you go over there and stand up for a minute, your organs will melt. They're at 25 sieverts at the base of them. So whoever was doing this, they would have died that day. That's the most ruthless pictures imaginable. The industry has no soul. Whenever I see these pictures, I picture somebody at the International Atomic Energy Agency with a microphone talking to whoever's taking the picture, telling them to point to where they want that person to go from Vienna, right? In Vienna. The IAEA, as far as I know, didn't go there for at least 12 years, till 2023. And that was just to pick up a check for, what was it? I can't remember. $19 million? Because Japan is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. So whoever stood there, they died that day for sure. Whoever took these pictures most likely died that day or that week. And there you got the 4 little monsters all in a row. A total of 36 reactor cores. And there was one in each reactor, except for reactor 4. It was in the pool. And so that meant in the pools of each of them were 8 reactors. So there was 9 reactor cores in unit 4. 9 in reactor 3, 9 in reactor 2, 9 reactors in number 1. They're all gone. And whoever took that picture, they're gone too. Like the reactor cores, they're gone. It's the most frightening pictures I've ever seen. When you spray a region, whenever you spray these regions to bind with the fuel particulates, that's a no man's land forever. It's just absurd that they had somebody do that. That was the International Atomic Energy Agency, no less. And the fuel pool of reactor 1 was dispersed in an explosion. And same thing clearly for reactor 3 and reactor 4. Anyway. Let's keep going. That's not it. So the top of that building of any of these reactors cannot make a plume like that. And that's the fuel pool reactor core ejected right out of the building. Where am I to? I gotta get down to the bottom of these pictures. So have we made it through 2 stories tonight? That's pretty good. That's a good night. No, I haven't made it through 2 stories. Well, we did. Story 3. This is a long 2 stories. This is the 3rd story, April 11th, 2011. Japan's nuclear disaster put on par with Chernobyl. Chernobyl was single reactor. Fukushima's 4. Chernobyl never had no fuel pools. Each of these had 8 reactor cores in each building. In the fuel pool, they're gone too. Now, they knew that. The New York Times knew that. Like, these are weapons. That's the mainstream media is a weapon. It's not a media. It's a public relation weapon. And very powerful. Japan has decided to raise its assessment on the accident at the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant to the worst ratings on the international scale, putting the disaster on par with 1986 Chernobyl explosion. It's like Chernobyl. It was brutal, don't get me wrong. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, the United Kingdom. There's a brutal amount of orphanages of disfigured, deformed children abandoned. They did on sex ratio studies in all of Europe because of the radioactive fallout. The new estimates by the Japanese authorities suggest the total amount of radioactive material released so far is equal to about 10% of that released in the Chernobyl accident. 10%. This was the Deputy Director General of Japan's nuclear regulator and the Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency. So they give him this incredible long name so that it's like the average person like, well, he wouldn't lie to me. That's the ones you don't, their job is to cut your throat. We actually got a picture of that sack of shit here coming up eventually. Fukushima Reactor 3 to your left and Fukushima Reactor 4. I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? Mr. Nishiyama stressed that unlike at Chernobyl where the reactor exploded and fire fanned the release of radioactive material, the containments at the 4 troubled reactors at Fukushima remained intact. That's simply not true. I mean, this is April 11th. It's 30 days later, right? So he's the expert. He looks at that and he says that remains intact, for instance. It's humiliating that people like that exist, right? He looked at reactor 4. Now, he's the expert. Like the expert at the Mayo Clinic will tell you that nothing got out of Fukushima. There was no radioactive fallout. The list is very long. He's in charge of your loved ones and children when they go there for so-called cancer radiation therapy. Only 2.3% will live 5 years after going to these places. What do you need to convince you? I'll find it for you. They're actually insane. And so that's number 4, okay? All right, here we go. Let's just go through where the reactor self-exploded, fire fanned the release of the radioactive material. The containment at the 4 troubled reactors had remained intact. They're not intact. This is a 2013 picture. Right, this is before they put the fake covers over to manipulate you worldwide. The Deputy Director of Japan's nuclear regulator, Nuclear Industrial Safety, the Industrial Safety Agency, So, like, if you can't trust him, you're in real trouble, and you cannot trust him. Stressed it out like a Chernobyl where the reactor exploded. Cesium plume forecast for North America. France's Institute of Radiation Protection Nuclear Safety, IRSN, was 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima radioactive fallout for cesium-137. That model is only based on 8 days. This model stops at around 31 days. Let me go backwards. So you're at the 23rd. So that's 12 days later. 13, 14 days later. You're at 19 or 18 days, 19 days. You're at 20 days of radioactive fallout. This is the French government. At 1 million to 10 million times what it was pre-Fukushima for cesium-137. So it could be 30 million atoms in a cubic meter of air of just cesium. It's never going to go away because it's going to be polluted with everything else. But all the models have these particular attributes. When you get to around 30 days, it's all gone. So you're heading up close to 30 days. That plume is never going to go away. You can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or perceive it. But it attacks everything with replicating cells for infinity. Japan's authorities, and there's nothing with replicating cells that have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. Japanese authorities suggest the total amount of radioactive materials released so far is equal to about 10% of that released in the Chernobyl. 10%. So every expert came out and cut your throat. Every expert came out to cut your throat. So Dr. Frank von Hippel will tell you it was 8 reactors at the top of reactor 4 and also each building.
And if, in terms of what we know about the capacity, about how many fuel rods would likely be inside that reactor, what sort of quantity are we talking about radioactivity?
I've heard different numbers ranging from 2 to 15 reactor cores worth. No, 2 to about 8 reactor cores worth.
So if it can't be controlled, that's worst case scenario, 8 reactors worth of radioactivity.
Right.
And it would be released into the atmosphere.
By the way, the fact that this has happened at unit number 4 is understandable and is consistent with the theory that it really did dry out because the fuel from the unit number 4 was most recently discharged. Okay. And therefore was the hottest, and therefore the water would have boiled off more rapidly.
And so each of the reactors are 100 Chernobyls, so 900 Chernobyls in reactor 4. And I have to agree with that. They don't have a repository. The reactors are 40 plus years old. They're taking fuel out every 14 months. You can do the math. They assume there's 3,450 fuel assemblies. Each one is 1,800 pounds. Minimum at the top of each of the buildings. They're all gone from 4 buildings. Common spent fuel pools, as showed you, was completely pixelated out. Why would you do that? And then we have headlines not suggesting, but saying there's a meltdown. And other headlines clearly you can't have a renewed criticality without a meltdown. You gotta have the meltdown to have the renewed criticality. Japan previous rating of 5 placed. This is April 11. Placed Fukushima accident at the same level as 3 Mile Island in 1979, which they covered up. I just done an anniversary video on 3 Mile Island. Is worth your time. That was pretty nasty what they done to everybody. They didn't want anybody to panic, so they wouldn't let them evacuate. Now you got to stay here and get sick and die so the industry doesn't look bad. Japanese authorities suggest the total amount of radioactive material released so far is equal to about 10%. April 11th. So this is what it looked like on the 15th. That's just 2 of the reactors of the 4 reactors. And that's a total of 36 reactor cores, because the fuel pools are full of reactor cores for 4 decades each. And there's 8 of them, fuel pools. So 2 at the top of each of the buildings. And that's where they're keeping the fuel, because it's the stupidest design imaginable. To save money, I guess. And they built it on tectonic plates. 40 miles from the tectonic plates, for goodness sakes. The Ring of Fire, a very active tectonic plates. And a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis over 300 feet tall. Right there. And then they're claiming plausible deniability because it wasn't modeled in that could happen. Of course it could happen. Just because you didn't put it in the model, there's legacy, history is recorded of that happening. So there's no, any expert, any of these experts, particularly the experts, the head of the regulatory agencies, looks at that and says there's nothing got out, you're in trouble. You've got no one in the nuclear industry you can trust. There's not a single person in the nuclear industry that you can trust. If that's not the most frightening statement, what is? Every one of them are going to cut your throat. Everyone, without exception, in the nuclear industry. Every one of them. There was a few dissenting voices back in the day. They don't exist anymore. The scale, which was developed by the International Atomic Energy Agency, who's not a regulatory agency, who don't have any authority. They're an incredible threat to humanity and the 8 million species. And now they got their dream come true. The terrorists, the fiendish, the shady International Atomic Energy Agency. We like to refer to them as the terrorist. July the 4th, 2023, Japan gets UN nuclear watchdog approval. They're not a watchdog. Adding that Japan would have the final say on the release. UN gives Japan a stamp of approval to release the water. They're not entitled to destroy our oceans. He emphasized in the report that the document is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. Of course it is. The headline says it's an endorsement. They assure the safety. That's an endorsement. They give their stamp of approval. That's an endorsement. They get the approval from the UN watchdog. That's an approval. Right? Yes, no, maybe. Let me try one more time. Oh. Short. He emphasized the International Atomic Energy Agency report is neither a recommendation nor an endorsement. Japan government has the final say. All right. If you go read this story also, with the wicked witch from the International Atomic Energy Agency, that this wicked, foul, vile, desperate scum. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator, not in a position to judge or approve the Jap soil recycling program. Is Japanese nuclear crisis, is massive water dump making any difference? I don't know. Oh yeah, he thought that the spent fuel pools would only spend a few weeks on site before being shipped to a reprocessing plant. Like, is massive water dump making any difference? Blah blah blah. The Christian Star Monitor, Science Monitor. David Lockbrum, the director. He's the director of the Nuclear Safety Program at the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. The director of the Nuclear Safety Program, when you have a major event, comes out and says, well, I thought they were going to take the spent fuel out of the pool a few weeks later. Well, everybody knows you can't do it for at least a decade or more. And they quote him that in the media. And it's illegal. It's not illegal, rather. It's encouraged to be a monster. Being a monster, if you're in the nuclear industry, you're not a monster. They're gonna get rid of you right away. So this is like, all of these people is why we're asking this question. Should nuclear experts and scientists and journalists who covered up the Fukushima meltdown, that's all these people were doing, clearly, lose their degrees and jobs? And if I had any more room, it would have been to go to jail or get a death penalty or something sensible like that. Should they be dropped on their head from the top of the reactor they said never melted down? I don't know. You tell me. Back to the story. Nishiyama said tens of thousands of terabecquerels of radiation per hour have been released from the plant. So these are physical atoms he's talking about. But tens of thousands of terabecquerels sounds like a lot, right? Tens of thousands of trillions of atoms, what they're talking about. The Canadian reactors, the CANDU reactors, particularly like the New Brunswick one, releases legally 14,600,000 trillion tritium-3H atoms into the environment, legally each year. So a gram would be about 4.3 trillion atoms of cesium-137. So you're only talking about an ounce maybe, right? It was 6 million pounds released from each reactor building, at least. Probably a lot more. The authorities have already ordered people living, and the problem with all these particulates is they're split atoms forever. It's the worst case scenario for every species on the planet. The authorities have already ordered people living within 12 miles to evacuate, and recommended people remain indoors or avoid an area within a radius of 18 miles. Yeah, but this is April 11th. This is 30 days later. Anybody who didn't get out of there in the first 8 hours after they lost power, now we're in serious trouble. You got that 8-hour window to get out of Dodge before you get incredible releases. Idano also said that pregnant women and children and hospital patients should stay out of the area within 19 miles, and that schools in the zone would remain closed. But last night's story I was showing you all the first graders going to school with dosimeters around their necks. There's around 80,000 of them, and pregnant women. In fact, they were advertising pregnant women get a free house in the nuclear meltdown zone. For free. Get a house for free. Brand new. Just moving you and your little child back in there. Until now, the Japanese government refused to expand the evacuation zone. So this picture was taken on the 15th, 2011, on day 5. Came to the day of the tsunami, right? So we got 4 dead ducks all in a row with a total of 36 reactor cores gone. On the 15th, this picture was published in the major media on the 15th of March 2011. International agency, which is based in Vienna, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, said Sunday that its team measured radiation of 0.4 to 3.7 microsieverts per hour, 20 to 40 miles from the plant, well outside the initial evacuation zone. And at that rate of accumulation, it would take 225 days to almost 6 years to reach the Japanese government's threshold levels for evacuations. Think about that statement. On day 20, Neptunium-239 has already covered the entire planet in 20 days. Absurd doses, by the way, which decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. It does that over 10 different... it'll decay to a different isotope, right? But it's pulsing energy for 240,000 years total. And here's a plutonium radioactive dispersal. So you had this horrifying amount. It's terrifying. It's unforgivable. It's not shameful. It's unspeakable. It's hideous that they've done this to us. So it was acknowledged that in Tokyo, 500 billion atoms per kilogram. And you got to multiply it by, and we'll do the math here. I don't think I could do a number that big on my particular calculator, but let's give it a go. Let's just do it. So 500 trillion atoms a kilogram. It's just absurd. 500 trillion, right? So 500 times 66.6 to get a square meter. That would be 33,300 trillion atoms per square meter. And this stuff they're talking about is highly radioactive. So it's pulsing scary energy every second. Japan declares Fukushima area no entry zone. Well, we made it that far, did we? Let me delete all of this. That was crazy. So if you try to challenge every lie, you only get to do three stories over 2 hours. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to do every lie, because you can read. There's lots of the lies there I didn't try to cover, right? But it's up. So like these stories are written as social engineering, and so people are out there with a ferocious appetite originally, and the problem was this industry is well aware of all of that, and it's fixated on lying to you. It's fixated on lying to you. Let me see where we're to. That was a good show tonight. There's great information, my goodness. Alright. I guess that's it for us. Find a song from James over there. Bless your heart, by the way, James. My goodness, man. It's got so much there. It's so hard to choose, right? I'm going to go back into his archive there. Well, he's produced more anti-nuclear music than everybody on the planet combined. And he's got amazing stuff there. I'm going to look for that one, that bluesy one. So so much great music. I don't even find the name of it, have I? SMR Hype Train. Back here. SMR Hype Train. Did I go past it or something? Must have. SMR Hype Train. There it is. Alright. I'll come back and close the poll after. So you can still get a vote in on the poll. You can still get a vote in on the poll. Should nuclear experts, scientists, and journalists who covered up Fukushima's meltdowns lose their degrees and jobs? Bless your heart. So I turned the sound down. I'm going to stop the video. And I'm going to start I'm going to come in with a lower volume than normal and then pick up the volume so I don't actually get too high of a volume, because I've done that a couple times lately. Don't want it to be distorted on your end. So I just wanted to make sure it was in 1080. And I'll see you Sunday, hopefully. I might see you earlier if there's an event, right? Hugs for everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Truck parks by your school. Risk, nah, that's the golden rule. A lawsuit here, a bailout there, but hey, don't breathe the Utah air. Hype train, full speed ahead. Choo choo, baby, that's what they said. More reactors, more mistakes. When it derails, guess who pays? A factory built so nice and neat. Stack them up on any street. A soda can could last for years, but where it vents, that's unclear. They called it clean, they called it cheap, till the budget's in too deep. Cost per watt through the roof. We swear it works, but where's the proof? Hype train, watch it roll. On your street, out of control. They want it fast, they want it now. Same old scam in a different town.
Accidents don't happen with great frequency. SMRs produce less waste. Spent fuel, just store it on site. Trust us, this time we got it right. Hype train, can't slow down. Crashing straight into your town. No meltdown, no waste, no doubt. Wait, where's the money now? Well, that didn't work. Hype train, can't slow down. Crashing straight into your town. No meltdown, no waste, no doubt. Wait, where's the money now? That didn't work.